Let's get started. I apologize for starting late. I had to request the bill in another committee, and they enjoyed the opportunity of having me stand in front of them and ask me questions. So, right, there were 5 or 6 questions, and I think they were just harassing me. So, let's see. First item on the agenda, meeting minutes from February 1st, 3rd, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 15th. Any questions, corrections, changes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Representative Hoheisel? Is there a second? Representative Humphreys? Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. And I've almost caught my breath. Okay, hearing. Let's open the hearing on Senate Bill 300. And we will have Natalie give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 300 amends the Kansas Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. We typically refer to that as RICO. It adds a person who has engaged in identity theft or identity fraud to the definition of a covered person. And it also adds identity theft and identity fraud to the definition of racketeering activity. The bill amends KSA 216328. That's the definitions section throughout the RICO Act. The definition of a covered person there is expanded to include any person who is engaged in or is engaging in any conduct prohibited by KSA 216107. That's the statute that criminalizes identity theft and identity fraud. And then later down in that section, the definition of racketeering activity is expanded to mean to commit, attempt to commit, conspire to commit, or to solicit, coerce, or intimidate another person to commit any felony or misdemeanor violation of KSA 216107. Again, that's the identity theft or identity fraud statute. In my brief there, you can see what is covered by RICO. If you have any questions, I can answer them. The Senate Committee on Judiciary did substitute this bill, but it was only to update the supplemental references and to make sure that we were amending the most current version of the statute. So I can take any questions.
Any questions for Natalie? Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it's not so much for Natalie, but perhaps for the chair or committee staff. We have a fiscal note on this, and it makes reference to a bed impact statement from the Sentencing Commission, but I couldn't see that we have the bed impact statement from the Sentencing Commission. Is that available somewhere?
We will find that and get that sent out, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hey, thank you, Natalie. We will begin with proponents, and we have Greg Smith on WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for not being able to be there in person today. My faithful county vehicle decided not to be so faithful today. But just briefly, we appreciate the committee hearing this bill. There are a lot of victims of victim identity theft throughout the United States and Kansas. In fact, Kansas ranks in the top 5 for identity theft. And we are very thankful for this bill, for the tools it provides, particularly for prosecutors to help combat this devastating crime. A lot of victims from this suffer emotional trauma. Research shows that they often exhibit grief-like depression, anxiety symptoms, and a loss of a sense of safety after their identity has been taken. And so we'd be very pleased that the committee would recommend the bill for passage, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions, committee? Okay, thank you, sir. Committee, we have written proponent testimony from Senator Peterson, from Ed Klump and his 3 organizations, and then from Steve Kearney with the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association. Anyone else as a proponent? Any neutral conferees? Any opponents? Any questions, Representative Humphreys?
Sorry, I was a little late. I do have a question, maybe for our proponent, Mr. Smith. What crime is mostly prosecuted under the RICO law?
I appreciate the question. It's probably a better question for staff. There are several different types of crimes that are listed under the RICO Act.
I was just trying to figure out like what, we're adding this to what other things?
Let's have Natalie try to answer that question. Representative Heiberger, did you have an answer or a question? Okay, then we'll hold off on your question. We'll let Natalie try to get us some information first.
Mr. Chairman, so this section that we're amending, which is KSA 216328, if you have the bill in front of you, subsection F defines racketeering activity. And so that there's a very long list of crimes that are covered under racketeering activity. And so then when you look at 216329, you'll see it's unlawful for any of those covered people that we talked about it's basically kind of like receiving proceeds from these crimes that are interlinked in kind of like a bigger conspiracy. So that's what makes it a RICO violation. But you should be able to, in the bill, see the list of those crimes there in subsection F.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Heiberger.
Thank you. And I apologize, Mr. Smith, for not having read your testimony prior to the hearing, but could you just tell us what you're charging these identity theft crimes as now, and why is the bill necessary?
Representative Heiberger, I appreciate your question, but I was unable to tell what you said.
We'll try it again. Could you just tell us what you're charging these identity theft crimes as now, and why is this bill necessary?
This is a huge problem. I mean, Kansas witnessed it just last year with the number of identity thefts that we had just on the unemployment side. But it's an ongoing enterprise, as the statute calls it, for several organized groups of people that go out of their way to find somebody's identity, take it, and then use it. They either sell it or they use that information to open multiple accounts, order things, bring up new credit cards, and the victim has no idea that all this is going on. And by the time they find out, they can very easily be in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even more in debt for transactions that they didn't even have anything to do with.
Well, you didn't really answer my question. You may not have heard everything I asked, but I guess what are these crimes being charged as now, and what is in this bill is going to make it more helpful for you to stop these crimes?
Well, by being under the RICO Act, there's an enhancement in the penalty, obviously, and it would go after these, especially these organized groups that are trying to do this or that do it in a serial manner. And so the penalty is more severe than just the standard penalty for identity theft.
Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy Smith. I've heard what you have said about organized groups going out and stealing identities, but I just have a picture of some guy sitting in his mommy's basement scanning the internet and getting the information on some person and selling it. And I'm not familiar with the collective behavior that would fall under RICO as a kind of a conspiracy.
Well, probably one example I could give you, Representative Wheeler, are you familiar with the term darknet?
I am not, sir, and that's what I'm looking for. I know there's something out there now that barely can turn on my computer doesn't know about.
I don't blame you. Darknet is a part of the internet. It's not the part that we get on when you use social media or those types of things, but it's a part that can be accessed. It's not necessarily my specialty. I know superficially about it, but it's an area where people operate and they transact business there in items, commodities, identities that are not legal to do. It is possible to, if you know how to use the dark net, you know where to make the contacts. That person you described sitting in their mother's basement that's stealing identities can then go to the dark net and turn around and sell those for several $1,000s a pop, and then that person will use it and they can sell it off to somebody else. So you get into that group of people, sometimes not even acting in concert, but acting as a group that are selling and reselling an identity.
So are we going after darknet and the owners and operators of that, or everyone who uses it? Are they all part of the RICO under this act?
Well, that's going to be up for the prosecutor to decide on how they can make the case and put things together. But you know, when we investigate and try to track these things down, it can be very difficult. And it may be one person that commits serial identity theft, which would put them under this act, or it could be an organized group that would put them under the act.
Thank you, Deputy. I appreciate the information.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this would be for any of the proponents, but Deputy Smith, you might want to address it. I was just curious, looking through the bill quickly, is if this crime is perpetrated by someone in Iowa or some other state, would that be able to be prosecuted under Kansas law? I was just looking at the on page 2 of the bill under enterprise. It talks about those that are charged in the state. Would that fall under more of a federal RICO violation, or is that something that's can be prosecuted here in Kansas?
I don't know if you want me to take that, or if I'm not mistaken, I saw Mr. Klump was there sitting in the audience, if I'm not mistaken.
He's awake, I think, so maybe he'll want to address it.
He is moving.
It's a good sign.
Thanks, Greg. Ed Clubb with the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Peace Officer Association, Kansas Sheriff Association. So just to make sure I understand the question, just briefly, what was the specific thing you're after?
So if the crime was committed by someone in another state and stole an identity from a Kansan, but they were in another state, is there a federal law that falls under for an interstate type of criminal activity, or would they be prosecuted under this law?
I think they could be prosecuted under either. If they're crossing state lines in that conduct, then I think the feds certainly can do that. One, they're going to probably be using some form of interstate communication system to do that, which would engage the feds. But also, I believe that this may be one of the crimes. This is probably a better question for the revisor, that there are some crimes that can be prosecuted in Kansas if either end of the transaction takes place in Kansas. But I'm not sure on the specifics of that. So I wouldn't want to say for sure, but I would assume that's right. Mr. Chairman, while I'm up here, if I could take a shot at Representative Heiberger's question. Currently, identity theft is chargeable under a specific identity theft statute, which is the one being added to this. But the advantage of having it in RICO is when you have an organization, and it doesn't have to be a formal organization or even a legal organization, but when you have an organization who is conducting ongoing illegal activities through any of these lists of crimes, then it allows you to build a case against the entire enterprise. Where if you just charge the identity theft, you're going to charge the people directly involved in that, and maybe one layer out from it, and that's probably the best you're going to be able to do. But in this, when we have an organization that is behind criminal activity, think of it about like the mobs in the years past. You had that big organization that was really behind the criminal activity, but you had these other people that are out conducting it. It allowed you to go after that in the background bigger organization. And that's what RICO does. It allows us to do that. And they're not easy cases to build. They're time consuming. And so it's usually, reserved for those very large operations like that.
Sort of a follow-up. So even if our law would give us jurisdiction over people on the dark net, for instance, how would we prosecute a conspiracy for people we can't find? Or is this an example like that thing from Bob Dylan's song where he said they got him on conspiracy, but they wasn't sure who with?
Yeah, well, in Kansas, if you're going to convict on a conspiracy, you got to know who with. But the dark net's kind of a different creature all in of itself. The dark net is like the internet, but what they do is all those transactions, instead of going to one internet service provider, they get routed through hundreds of different providers and make it impossible to track who the actual person is engaging in that internet conversation. And so those are kind of a different thing. What RICO would really be after would be if you had somebody, even if they're using the internet or the black net or not, if you have an organization, and we see this, gangs have kind of branched out into a lot of human trafficking now. That's one of the crimes that's included in RICO already. But you have those organizations that may use the dark net, but that doesn't matter what their platform is. It's that enterprise that is engaged in this activity.
Mr. Chair. So if I'm reading this right, we have two guys sitting in mom's basement and stealing stuff and selling it on the dark net together. We can use this law. We have one guy sitting in the basement selling it on the dark net. We really can't use it. Is that accurate or not?
I think it's clearly accurate that one person, you could not use this law. I'm not sure you could use it with two. I think you have to somehow prove that this is an enterprise, a group of people who are engaged in this conduct. And I don't know if there's a minimum number to that. I'm just not sure how in practice that is. That's probably a better question for a prosecutor. But I would think we would go under the conspiracy if we had two or more people in a local setting, like sitting in grandma's basement doing this. We wouldn't use RICO. RICO takes much more than that. It usually takes activity that you can prove is occurring over time.
Okay, next, from his basement and likely on the dark net, Representative Carmichael.
I want you to know that I'm sitting in my office on the first floor of my home looking at my backyard, and it's very nice out there. My question, though, is for Deputy Smith. Deputy, as best I can tell from the discussion we've had and what I knew before I came to this, we already have a federal RICO statute. We have federal wire fraud statutes. We have a whole panoply of things that are available to the federal government to prosecute this type of crime. And given the fact that the dark net is principally headquartered, or the servers are offshore, many of them are in Eastern Europe, given the fact that all of this is already illegal, isn't this bill just about show, just acting like that we're doing something about a problem? In reality, it's really not adding anything.
Well, thank you for the question, Representative. Mr. Chairman, I think perhaps I wasn't clear. I gave the darknet as an example. That is not all-inclusive. And as Mr. Klump just spoke of, any type of enterprise, whether it doesn't have to be on the internet. This could be something that takes place in person, physically, human trafficking, drug trafficking. There's a number of offenses that fall under this, so it doesn't have to be an internet crime.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up, if I might. But we're not talking about human trafficking or drug trafficking. This bill is about identity theft, isn't it, Deputy?
Absolutely. I can also give you the example of a credit card reader that's inserted into
but that's not, Deputy, that's not identity theft. That's theft of a financial device, and it's a form of wire fraud, but it's not identity theft to steal a credit card and then go use it in an ATM or use a scammer device to gather credit card numbers. That's not identity theft. This bill doesn't deal with that, does it, sir?
Okay, if you say so, Representative.
I do say so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, committee? Okay, we've had proponents, opponents. Well, we didn't have opponents and we didn't have neutrals, but I asked for them. So I think we're done. I'll close the hearing on House Bill 300. Committee, that's all for today, but let me tell you where we're going the rest of the week. I'm trying to anticipate what Senate bills are being referred to us, and I think I had a pretty good guess. So tomorrow we're going to hear Senate Bill 141, which is the Kansas Uniform Directed Trust Act. One of those that, is super exciting, and we're thrilled to be here. And I think we're only going to have one conferee, likely via WebEx. So we'll have that one, and that will be it tomorrow. Then on Thursday, House Bill 2674, that's a bill that came out of House Corrections, got below the line. It's going to be sent to us to hear and possibly tweak a little bit. Then we're going to have House Bill 2582, which is a bill that came out of House Children and Seniors. And that's another one that's getting sent here to hear and possibly tweak a little bit. And then Senate Bill 425. Senate Bill 425, I think, is identical to House Bill 2582, or really close. So we're going to do a hearing on both of them just so we have a shell if we need it. And then that will be it for this week. If we're going to work bills Thursday, I'll let you know tomorrow, but I'm not sure that we will. Looking forward to next week. Likely going to have 3 or 4 bills each day early in the week, and then give us some time to work stuff. And then that following week, we'll just kind of keep an eye on what comes from the Senate. So could be busy for a couple days, and then maybe slow down a little bit until we see what else comes from the Senate, and then try to figure out how we're going to put things together to send back to the Senate. We do have a couple of bills that are bills that were below the line, at least one. The 2556, which is one of the expungement bills, was sent back to us for a potential tweak. And then we had some other bills blessed that we'll have to work at some point in time. So we've got a lot of bills still to deal with, but hopefully we can get a lot of that done early next week. So we have some time to make sure we get the bills worked and on their way. So that's where we're at. Any questions about where we're at? Let me look online. Not seeing anyone. So thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're adjourned.